well, we're a couple of minutes past the hour, so I think it's time to start, and those who are potentially running a little late can join us. Welcome to this DFI webinar. Today we're looking at the concept of capacity building during this COVID-19 crisis and wondering whether online is the answer. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sarah Corley. I'm DFI's community manager, and it's my pleasure to run the webinar series for DFI. We've got about 27 attendees so far, and I'm sure the number's just going to go up because we had close to 100 people register. So to manage the session, in order to get round to all of your questions or viewpoints or anything that you want to share with us, please do so in the Q&A box rather than the chat function. The Q&A box just helps us to manage the questions a little bit better, and we can also download them afterwards so we can get round to answering any that we may have missed. The meeting, or the webinar, is being recorded, so we'll be sharing the recording possibly after Easter, given it's our Easter break starting from tomorrow, and I'm not sure I'll have a chance to get everything sorted before close of business today. But we'll be sending an email around to you with the recording so you can share with any relevant colleagues who may have missed today's session. It's really great to see a lot of familiar names with us. I know they're familiar because they're either working on our DFI courses or they're our DFI alumni. So this gives me good hope at the beginning of our webinar that online might be the answer, because we know we've got some success stories who've already joined us today and experienced online learning. We have got an amazing panel with us today to talk a bit more about these options. We've got Paul Hobden, who is DFI's COO on the call with us, Lutz, who is the CEO of Zayab Consulting, Thom Sinclair, the CEO of Gateway Academy, and Esselina, who holds 3 impressive job titles, not one: CEO of FSD Mozambique, Professor at Eduardo Mondlane University, and also DFI's COP facilitator for Mozambique as well. Between the 5 of us, I think we've probably got around a decade of experience. I hope I didn't embarrass anybody with their ages there, but I think we've all worked in this field and sector for quite a long time now. So I'm sure we'll be enjoying sharing our thoughts and experiences on this topic with you, and hopefully helping some of you along the route of moving to online learning. We're in such strange times at the moment, very unprecedented. Many of our countries, or the countries that we work in, are completely locked down. We can no longer meet face to face. So how do we continue to do things like capacity building during this difficult time and in these difficult circumstances? Is online the answer? And that's what we're going to explore today. So I'm going to share the first few thoughts of our panelists. We put together a few slides just to help them remember what their 3 key points were, which I'm going to share with you, and also ask them to share a little bit about any interesting information or background about themselves, why they do that. So I'm just going to share my screen to get things started. Perfect. There we go. There's photos of our beautiful panelists. And we are first going to hop across to Esselina, to Mozambique, to hear from you. Esselina. You might just need to unmute yourself, Esselina.
Yeah, okay. That's what I did. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all participants and also to my co-finalists. And thanks, Sarah, for this opportunity to express idea around the pandemic that all of our countries are presently facing, and in somehow the impact is reflecting to the individual, family, and also in our activities. And today we're going to discuss this issue regarding the capacity building during this pandemic. There are here 3 questions or thoughts that I would like to share, and also to hear for the participants what they are also thinking about that one. The first is regarding the digital finance sphere to collaborate with the mobile and digital solution for population during that pandemic, and the potential of gap in terms of skill and the knowledge in order to use those digital solutions. This is regarding with my work that I'm doing, particularly in the area of FSD, where we are promoting financial inclusion using digital solution. And some of our beneficiaries, although they are digital solutions, they'll continue having personal touch. And they'll continue having contact with the agents, contact in order to get liquidity, to get cash. And the question is, how do you prepare those people in order to do the fully digital solution? All of us were saying that digital might be a solution at this moment. But we are in the moment that people are not fully digital literate. So you do have also a big challenge here, that even those solutions, they are not completely digitalized, or the people that are not completely digital in order to use those solutions. So I think that yes, there is a gap in the knowledge in order to use the solution, but maybe it is an opportunity for us to start thinking on real business continuity plan. Usually when we do all the solution, we're all thinking on business continuity plan, assuming more on IT disaster recovery or IT disaster. But now we do have this pandemic, and all of us were called in order to see how we can do that. I just want to also to bring to this debate today the issue of how people living in a poverty, in a below line, poverty line, they can also cope with all those restrictions that were imposed by COVID-19. I do believe that we're going to assist many small and intermediate enterprise, many people not only suffering for the pandemic itself, but the consequence and the impact that it's going to bring to their life. Sorry for allowing me, I can also continue for the other two questions. I will do them both simultaneous. The question here is, me as a facilitator for the COP of the FS, we used to have our community of practice presential, but now because of the situation, we are now about the restriction, we are now required to do our interaction totally virtual. So I do believe that yes, online is a solution, but online alone cannot be coming, because there is also some challenge in order to have those fully online. And also we need to interact not all among us, but we need also to interact with the final beneficiary of our service. Yes, online might be a solution, but it should not be the solution. It must, from my point of view, should be one of the solution, and maybe we'll have to think another type of solution. Technology can help in providing those educational programs, but in a country like Mozambique, there are challenges, particularly when it's come to the infrastructure. We do have a problem that the student, people from the school, maybe they don't have all the resource in order to, sadly, in our moments to think on having all the educational program delivered online. There are opportunity in order to think that maybe after that pandemic, we'll have to see how we mix, how we use really technology for the benefit of the educational process as a whole. I will stop here in order to give more time for more interaction with other panelists about this interesting topic.
Thank you very much, Esselina, and you're absolutely spot on there. There's some pros and some cons of online learning and being online, which we'll be chatting about a little bit more through the webinar. So I'm going to move on now to our next panelist, Thom. Thom, over to you.
Good morning and good afternoon to all participants and my fellow panelists. One thing I want to say is, in addition to the work I do on Gateway Academy, I also teach at the George Washington University, and I have been doing what we're all thinking about doing, and that's moving my class online for the rest of the term. And it's been an adventure. We luckily have the tools to be able to do that, but we weren't ready. So looking at my first point, you know, there's a scramble to move in person. Training and learning online, and that is resulting in both innovation and probably some poor quality adult learning. I have seen that, I won't say where, although probably guess. In-person events have been canceled, right? And so no doubt there's a rush to do this. There are quick ways to do this, but unfortunately, if you move fast without thinking through the learning experiences, how you want to design this, how you want to meet your objectives, you could end up with some poor quality learning. And there are many ways you can move your learning online, however, in a way that is impactful and engaging and that meets your learning objectives. And it may not be perfect, but there are tools out there that you can use creatively. And if you're doing it quickly like this, you probably will lose some of the things that you might have in a learning management system, an LMS. Online learning is, though, I think, having a renaissance, and I think trust and confidence is being built during this time. Online learning has gone through many phases. I would say in the last 7 to 9 years, we've seen it really take off again and be much more learner focused and much more accessible. And this pandemic is requiring organizations to move learning online. Organizations like George Washington University, who we had the tools, but we weren't ready. And other organizations who have been complete laggards and who have never done anything online. At this point, it's your only option, right? That or cancel your training. But I'm seeing people really take advantage of this time to learn online. And where they're encountering quality online learning, we're seeing trust and confidence in that learning being built. So short-term fixes are necessary right now, but online learning really should be well planned out and will take time to build. So although it may make sense to get something up right now, real quality online learning takes planning and forethought. And there are many ways to ensure that your online experience meets your learning objectives, but it does take time and expertise. So recording a lecture or filming a speaker may be a component of online learning, but it's not quality online learning by itself. At the end of my remarks, I'll hand it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Thom. And quality is definitely going to be something we talk about a lot throughout this webinar. So thanks for bringing that up early on. Let's move along to Lutz to hear what your thoughts are, your key 3 points.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Good day, everybody. As I get started, maybe 60 seconds on myself, that helps a little bit to understand where my comments come from. Before setting up my own consulting company about a year or so ago, I used to work for 3 different technology leading companies in Europe, in the US, and then finally in Africa as well. And 16 years of that for a small company called Microsoft that you might or might not know, always in the intersection between technology and learning. And I will actually come back to that one later on. I thought I'll get started with a couple of teasers, which are all quotes. So let's start with the first one from Paul Romer. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not arguing that anybody of us would rather not be in a pandemic. So I like to get that out of the way, but we are where we are. And so we have to deal with the situation. And what often happens is if you're forced into a situation, if you're literally thrown into the deep end of the water, you either swim or you don't. And what we see happening quite a bit now is now that people are faced with the, oh my God, I have to do something, a lot of the old objections, concerns, roadblocks, perceived or real, are not relevant anymore because the alternative is doing nothing. And that gives you almost like a permission to try things, to test them. You will succeed, sometimes you will fail, then you get up and you try again. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of. Not again that we have elected to be in that situation, but it's an opportunity to test drive what we do so that we learn how to use a new muscle down the road. So the time is actually now to start with them in whatever way you want to start. The second point is a quote from a former colleague of mine who is now running his own company as well, called Chris Perry. He used to be the CLO of Microsoft. Learning is the new working. What do we mean by that? The times where we have gone to school, qualified for a job, gotten the job, and then basically stayed in the same job for 20 or 30 years are increasingly gone. If you remind yourself, briefly think about how your own role and your own job has changed over the last 3 or 5 years. Do you believe moving forward that pace of change will slow down or go away, or is likely to accelerate? Are you hiring different people today than you hired 3 or 5 years ago? Will you hire different people moving forward? So that kind of constant need to upskill what we know and be fresh with our knowledge, we believe is now actually the hallmark of the new working. Hence, the new way of working actually is to constantly learn. And if you then follow my argument that, and again, look at your own jobs, more and more, whatever job you do is being changed, augmented, transformed by technology. So your work becomes more and more digital. How can your learning not follow that? So one of my arguments that for today would be is, I don't believe it's just a fluke. And after the pandemic, we will go back to normal. I actually believe that what is happening anyways, and we see a lot of organizations already do, is being accelerated through that crisis that we've been thrown into. And the last statement I'd like to make as an opening statement, it always seems impossible until it's done. And in a little bit, Thom, I hope you don't mind, I will not contradict what you were saying, but maybe build a bit of a pathway to where you went. Thom is absolutely right. If you want to build really good online learning, you kind of have to know what you're doing, and we will talk about how companies can help you. But I'd like to also make the argument is the very first step can be very simple. And I think you need the first step so that you get going, because otherwise you look at this mountain that seems to be insurmountable. You'll probably all have colleagues or friends that one day declare, I think I start jogging. Next thing you know, they actually register for a half marathon and then send you a picture how they actually finished that marathon. You're going, when and how did that happen? Well, they took the first step and started somewhere. So for me, in this kind of learning and working world, the starting point is to look at ourselves. I'm always amazed how often I actually talk to people that are responsible for learning or in HR, you name it. And when I ask them a simple question, how do you learn yourself? I often get a little bit of a stare. That's a really good question. So if you want to have a good opinion of how non-classroom learning looks like, how if you give it a test drive? There are so many ways where you can start. There is a lot of free stuff on there through the MOOCs, the massive open online courses. If you want to have a very gradual start, is you might or might not the TED Talks. I love the TED Talks, small 10, 15, 20 minutes increments, and you learn something new. Enlist yourself, participate, and observe what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And you already started building experience with online learning. We'll go a little bit deeper later on, Sarah, as I know, but let me finish with those 3 things. So get started somewhere, and now is the perfect time. And I also believe what we are learning and doing now will be actually with us moving forward. Back to you for now, Sarah.
Great, thanks so much, Lutz. I love the half marathon analogy. I think it's a really good one to remember that you don't get to the end easily. It's a journey that you go through, and those people that joined the webinar today, that's their first step maybe for some. So it's great. Awesome, well, let's move on to our final panelist. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Sarah, and welcome to all our participants and to my fellow members of the panel. A little bit of background about myself. I started out my career as a teacher, so deeply embedded in education, and then moved into commercial roles where I was largely responsible for migrating brick and mortar businesses into digital businesses. And now I've come full circle back into education and into the realm of moving education into a digital and online space. The 3 things that really strike me at the moment about capacity building and the challenges amid this crisis are firstly the significant cognitive and emotional load that it's putting on all of us, and consequently on participants in courses, on people that we are trying to build capacity in. And the amount of attention and emotional energy that is given to the immediacy of the crisis, keeping businesses operating, keeping households operating, keeping children educated, tends to narrow our focus and narrow our participants' focus to very immediate things, both in terms of the solutions we come up with to continue building capacity or continue developing our businesses, and about ourselves in our career. We're not necessarily thinking 18, 24 months down the line. We're thinking very much now. And I think it's worth bearing that in mind when dealing with both the solution and the people in whom we're trying to build capacity. The second issue is, as we scramble, and as a number of companies scramble to go online, to convert from having done face-to-face tuition or face-to-face conferences or face-to-face workshops to doing it online, there is a real requirement for us to understand, how do we ensure that quality is transferred, that what is produced has a level of quality, that the participant gets the outcomes that is intended. And that to me is something that needs to be focused on, is how do we ensure that it's not just a mad race to digitize, but that there is a thought behind still trying to achieve the outcome. And the third thing that kind of weighs on my mind is that good education, good capacity building is about more than just transferring skills or transferring knowledge. It's not about just ensuring that people know something or are able to do something. It needs to have a transformative element to it, that it takes someone from a position and they are transformed. They are enabled. They are open to more. And that to me is something we need to focus on as we move online, is it's not just about ensuring that there is content or that there is assessment of that content or that people know things. It needs to be that the experience for that person in capacity building transforms them, makes them enabled to deliver more, to experience more, to give more. And that's an element that sometimes can get lost in the haste to just digitize content and to assess against that content.
Thanks, Paul. And I've been seeing a lot on LinkedIn, and maybe you guys have seen it as well, posts encouraging people to learn and make the most of the next few weeks while they're on lockdown and not able to travel much, to learn a new skill. But I've also seen that actually people are just trying, some people are just trying to survive the next 3 weeks, that they don't have the bandwidth or the ability to do that. So, you know, it's an unusual time, and we need to be really sensitive to the different conflicts that might be happening in people's lives, and facilitate those who have got time to take advantage of those. So thank you so much for sharing your initial views, and we're going to delve into those topics a little bit more detail as we progress through the webinar. So we are now going to try and take you on a little journey with us this afternoon, firstly looking at it from a student perspective, then through to like a company or an organization perspective, then taking you through some ideas as to how you could go online. If you're looking to put some training online, how you might do that, how you can design and develop and utilize platforms. And then we'll wrap up with some thoughts about if you are struggling to think about ways in which to get your staff to develop, how we might be able to encourage you to make some decisions around that. So I'm going to start with Esselina. And Esselina is a student of DFI. She's done many online courses with us and is almost at the end of her 3-year CDFP journey with us. So Esselina, can you share with us about your experience? Why did you choose to study online? How are you finding it? What are the advantages? What are some of the maybe barriers that you've experienced?
Thanks, Sarah. The reason when I decided to take that course, first is that before I decided if it was online or presential, the decision was made more on the content of the course. This was my first decision regarding the content of the course, particularly because my work was too much related with the major of the model that the course as a whole is belonging. And also I started to interest other people to take that course. For me, it was a good advantage to have the course online because I was able to do that one after hours. It was not part of my working hours. Allow me to do some of the models earlier morning before I go to the office or after office hours. So it was a good thing. And the best things that I saw particularly in this platform that DFI has was that give me an opportunity to be, as I was in a real campus, in a virtual campus. I could have different situation that we have presential was also available in that platform. And we were able to discuss different topics with people being in different countries. So for me, it was a very good experience. And that experience was also very good one because give us opportunity within the community of practice to discuss the things that were discussed globally in the course, try to put in the concrete case of our country. So I found it was easy for me to navigate in that course, and I find it benefit. The question is if it was been a course as we are now in terms of transforming for financial, for skill building for someone who's doing presential, and sadly because of the crisis to change, is what one of the panelists was saying. In order to go to online, you need to prepare yourself. You need to prepare the infrastructure and the resource to do that. You cannot decide just in one day to change to that reality. There is a lot of organization, a lot of production materials that are so accommodated the way that you deliver the materials. So it's what I can say in the beginning. I saw some of the question. I don't know when you will let us know when we can comment the questions that are coming from the participants. But
sure, I'm going to ask those a little bit later, but I've got another one for you, Esselina. Is as well as a student with us, you've also been, through your FSD role, been instrumental in funding a number of other students. So you've encouraged people to do online learning. Was it a choice for you? Would you a difficult choice to encourage people to do online learning? Was it difficult to get some people that had maybe never experienced it before to join those programs?
Me as an individual, I follow the principle that anyone has to learn along the life. And if you are open to learn at all moments, you are also open to push others that you never stop. You never stop learning. Life is a journey of learning, and it was for me easy to bring in. Even some discuss, if we discuss, for instance, if you were discussing the issue of digital ID, and I saw that people do not have the concrete basic to be in that kind of discussion, I was suggesting them why you are not taking a online course so that you inform yourself, so that you can participate in such a debate with a very fundamental, which is different. You can read books about that, but it's different in that course because you interact with different people that have already implemented. You can put your question, and there is a lot of interaction. So for me, it was easy to advocate for this kind of course because I believe that always we have to learn.
And what impact have you had some of those courses in Mozambique? Are you seeing an increased capacity amongst DFS providers?
As far as I know, in terms of alumni, we are more than 50, and I think yes. Where I can see a changes even within my organization, you can see the level of how the people are understanding better all this debate around the digital financial service. For sure, I think there is, and when we did the evaluation of the whole program, it was also clear that some participants also stated that they have improved their knowledge about this through this course.
Great. So we have a few success stories definitely in Mozambique where people have managed to increase their levels of understanding, increase their knowledge. I know I've alumni that have started up their own and are using the information in their own startups and their own fintechs. So it's good to see that when you make the right decisions, you actually have that growth in skill and knowledge. Yeah,
it is why we launched in February the FinTech Association, which was also part of all this debate that alumni were having, and when the FinTechs themselves decided to join and create an association. Most of them, they are alumni.
That's great. So we've got an active bunch of people that have learned something on an online course and come together and would usually meet face to face, which so it's kind of that maybe a bit of blended learning that's going on there, both the combination of meeting face to face and online, which people are finding useful. But I also love the fact that you brought back to the importance of interaction and being able to question that improved the experience that you had of online learning. It wasn't a one-way street. It was a backwards and forwards, a real interaction process that you enjoyed about it. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Esselina.
Thank you.
I'm gonna pop over to Lutz with my next round of questioning. So I hope you're ready, Lutz, for your questions. So we've heard from Esselina, she was confident to make that jump, and her own experience of online learning made her passionate and willing to recommend it to other people to try. What are the challenges and skill gaps? Why are people not making that first step? Either people moving their content online if they're a provider, or as a recipient moving to learning online?
Yeah, great, great question. I think there are a couple of things that work, but if I had to pick one thing that I observe very often, it's a little bit of a black-white thinking. So I've been in many, many discussions where the question is, can we really go online, as if that means we have to drop everything we've done previously and replace it with online only. I often compare that a little bit to how we feed ourselves. So I have a preference for going to a really good restaurant. It can be a 2- or 3-star restaurant, but you will find me at a fast food joint as well, just because I can't have the time nor the money, by the way, to always eat that way. Very naturally, I combine, or we all combine, how we feed ourselves and what makes sense, and we wouldn't even come up with the idea to optimize one against the other. And I think Esselina actually spoke about that a little bit already as well. So my first statement is, let's get out of this black-white thing. The question is not to stop physical interactions or traditional learning and replace it with online. The question is, what makes more sense, and where is one equally good or maybe even more effective? And since we talk about the financial services industry, last time I checked, at least in the last couple of years, I barely can remember when I had actually hard money in my hands. It's becoming more and more digital. In fact, I might be actually a perfect case because of my previous job and where I lived. I actually have a bank account and bank relationship on 3 continents, in Germany, in the US, and in South Africa. I can count probably on one hand how often I've been actually in a physical place called a bank on any of the continents within a year or 2. But I have very clear understanding and opinions, which of my banks are better or not. So if you're the service provider, do you need people increasingly that understand how to deal with me as a physical customer? Or do you need people that understand how to deal with me as a hybrid customer, where physical is an increasingly small part, but my interactions are increasingly digital? So what I think is what we have to understand is what to use for what. And I can tell you is, I would feel extremely comfortable to deal with bank employees, financial services providers that have consumed a lot of the training in a hybrid or online form, because that's exactly what I expect the experience to be on. And I'll be able to, for Hart, ask the question, will online learning become more recognizable, or will the university's degree that are still dominating? My response to that would be, yes, that's what it was in the past. But ask yourself, do you take someone that graduated from college, has a financial degree, but has literally not touched anything that's digital? Would you choose that person over someone that maybe came from a fintech company, already has a lot of that experience, and you don't necessarily even know what kind of a college degree that person had? You will make your choice. I know as an employer what I probably would do. So what I'm trying to say is, it really is the situation and the skill set, the capacity that we train. Maybe very quickly, Sarah, the last statement on the providers, and then I know that Paul and Thom can elaborate on this one, is quality is quality is quality regardless of where it is. What I see a lot of organizations doing wrong is to say is, we have to get the technology right. By the way, yes, you do. But if your quality of what you are trying to convey, the learning that you're trying to provide and sell is bad, it is bad in the classroom, or it's bad online, or in the combination thereof. I often compare that to, if I recommend a book to you, you will stop reading that, whether it's on a digital device or in a printed format. Even I give it to you for free, if on page 2 or 3 you decide this is not written well, right? And the same applies in my thinking in terms of learning. So, and we probably should talk about it a little bit more, but my input would be, if you are a training provider, if you are responsible for putting things somewhere where people can consume it, make sure that the quality of what you are doing is right. And the quality should be convincing on either platform. And then you can optimize for the platform capabilities that are there. And then indeed, they are very different. Let me stop there for now.
So, Sarah, if I can just add to something Lutz said there. Interestingly, there was a piece of research done in the States, end of last year or beginning of this year, where they asked parents hypothetically if they were given $65,000 and they could either buy a year's tuition at Harvard, or they could pay the living expenses of their child to go and do an internship at Google for a year. Which would they choose? And the majority of parents now chose an internship at Google. So I think that the tide is shifting around degrees, and we're seeing some of the big accounting firms dropping the requirement to have a degree as an entrance requirement. So I think the nature of accreditation, the nature of certification and qualifications is definitely changing, and will change rapidly in the next 5 years.
Thanks, Paul. It's interesting to see, that times are changing, and the emphasis on having a degree, having a master's or a PhD will change over time, and is changing currently over time. And I also want to pick up on what I thought was really interesting, Lutz, is quality, whether it's online or whether it's face-to-face. And I think that comes back to Esselina's point, that she chose the course because of the content. Not just the delivery model was online and it was convenient, and that's great, but actually it was the content itself, what was going to be covered, maybe who was also delivering, that made those choices. I know a lot of our alumni have always told me whenever I've gone out to meet them that being able to hear from world famous speakers like Ignacio Mas, David Porteous, and Gavin Kruger, who lead a lot of our courses, people that they've read blogs of, people they've seen speaking, that's important to them, and they couldn't get them physically in person if they didn't do it online. So there are definitely some interesting things coming out there as well.
Sarah, if I can quickly add something there, is because it's in line with that thinking, it is the content, but it's also the faculty as well. Someone that is not good at what they do in teaching terms will not succeed in a physical environment as well as in an online environment. But there's one important twist, and when you asked me about the providers, I didn't mention that. That's why I'm jumping in again. We have learned over decades how to be effective in a traditional classroom environment. All the little quirks of how fast do I have to speak, how do I write on the whiteboard, the little jokes that we crack that sometimes work or don't work, those are literally decades of experience of how to perform well as a faculty in a physical environment. I would argue that something similar, hopefully not taking decades, but not taking more than a weekend, we have to learn in a virtual environment as well. Right, so for example, if I do this now, you will get very annoyed because obviously that makes it very hard to hear. So that's a very simple example of I have learned that this is not a good idea while I'm presenting in a digital environment. But there are many other things that we need to learn to be effective in a virtual classroom as well that don't necessarily come naturally. They're not rocket science, but they're not easy transferable or 100% transferable from a physical classroom. So I would say it's an invitation to be patient with ourselves, but also to know we have to learn new tricks of the trade called teaching, because they're not 100% the same. And we just assume we've always done that in the new environment, it will come naturally. It doesn't.
Absolutely. The virtual classroom is different from the physical classroom. And yeah, we need to adapt to that situation for sure. Thom, I'm going to pop over to you now because I want to focus a little bit more. We started talking about this, we've used the word LMS, we know that there are places you can go to either put your training or to access training. But can you tell us a bit more about what is out there and what is an LMS, for example?
Sure. So an LMS is a learning management system, and it is a way to do lots of different things, track your learners, track their progress, to do grading, to post assignments or reading, all sorts of different tools and methodologies different LMSs have. Gateway Academy, ours is an LMS, for example, although we call it a learning platform because sometimes the word LMS can be a bit of a legacy term. Some of them have so much functionality that they're not as useful to what we're doing, where we built ours from scratch. So it's low bandwidth and able to work in other in areas where it might be more difficult for some of the more legacy systems. But I'd like to say that, you know, in thinking about going online, there are so many options. And I really like what I've been hearing, certainly about quality, certainly about starting small. I 100% agree with that. And one thing that people might think about now is looking at their training. Maybe this is an opportunity to make sure that you have that quality training and make sure that your instructors know how to facilitate online. There are all sorts of tools, tips and tricks of how to do it well. So many of them mention not messing with your microphone, for example, using video when you're on a call. So those are out there. But I would say in thinking about where you want to go and what platform you want to use, or what sort of methodology, if you want it to be synchronous or asynchronous, whether maybe you want a mix of that. Starting with your content and your learning objectives. What do you want to get out of that? What do you want your learner's experience to be? And I think even if you're starting small, you should take those things into consideration. In terms of our field, of course, that we have Gateway Academy and we have BFI, and we certainly are willing to talk to anybody who is interested in taking courses with us. There's also a white label option if an organization is ready to move in that direction and they would like their own platform. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Thom. I want to pick up on a word that you said in your speech there, bandwidth, because we had a comment that's coming from Ethel, and I know Ethel's in Zimbabwe, which I also know is having huge challenges in terms of availability of internet, but not only that, the cost of it. Bandwidth is a challenge in certain countries more than others. How can you is there a way that that using platforms or streaming that we can make it easier for people to view?
Yeah, yes. Right, and some of these, as I said, legacy systems take a lot of bandwidth, and so just a little plug for what we did when we built Gateway Academy is that we started, as I said, from scratch, and we only built the functionality in that our users needed. And I think that concept, you start with that concept and you're thinking about your learning online, I think that will serve you well. So what do your learners need? They may want video, but that may take up way too much bandwidth. There are video streaming services that take less bandwidth than others. YouTube is not the only game in town. Wistia is one that we use that helps us to lower bandwidth. I do think really thinking about your learners' experience, what their internet accessibility is like, what their access to devices is like, is extremely important. Many people access almost everything on their phone these days and hardly touch a computer. And so ensuring that your learning is responsive across devices. And what that means is it fits on a laptop, or it can fit on a tablet, or it can fit on a phone.
Great. Thank you, Thom. That's interesting to know that we can, thinking about the design, how we design things, what choices we make, what programs, what software we use, can make a difference to its ability to reach people and be easy to access. And so talking of design, I'm going to move over to chat with Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit more about you know, how do we build, how do we design, how do we assess online learning? What are the challenges, and how can we help people do that?
I think following on from Thom, I think there's two starting points, or two things that you really need to get right when you're planning this. You need to understand who the recipient is, who is the student. And that means understanding their social situation, their access to technology, their history, because then you can build something that meets their needs and is available to them. I think that's the starting point. And then the other starting point is, what is the outcome that you want from this? Not what's the content, but at the end of this course, what is the outcome? That's kind of fundamental. Once you have those two things in place, you can start to look at how do you create or select the correct content in the right format, in an accessible format. As Thom says, it's pointless creating high definition videos for students who just don't have the bandwidth to consume that. It's pointless creating reams and reams of text for an audience who want to consume it in a video format. So that's really the secondary point. Once you have those things aligned, you can look at how do you shape that content and provide that content in a format that they can accept and digest. Then you can layer on top of that interactions with their peers, interactions with faculty, interactions with other experts. And then finally, I think it's a case of, against that set of outcomes that you have identified right at the beginning, is think of appropriate ways to assess that. Both appropriate in terms of the student and their access to technology, and appropriate to the level of education that you're providing, and to the course itself. Just to add to that, and to kind of comment on something that Lutz said at the beginning, and to really speak to this concept of bandwidth as a problem. I think we often think of online learning as video, quiz, video, quiz, video, quiz. And I think that's a very narrow view of what it is. And you can start very small and very low tech ways and have massive impact. There is quite a well-resourced school in Cape Town called Rondebosch Boys High. And they partnered with a school in a rural community in the Eastern Cape. And what they were doing is they were sending their students down during the July holidays to spend 2 weeks in this rural community and doing peer-to-peer tutoring for maths and accountancy to try and improve the results of the school. The consequence of this was actually that the boys exchanged telephone numbers with the pupils from the Eastern Cape. And actually the real impact happened after that, when through SMS messaging, so old style feature phones, there was an exchange between the pupils, and they could answer questions, they could get access to teachers and to resources that sat in Cape Town that could then be transferred back to the Eastern Cape. And there were massive improvements in the pass rates in that school. So they're a very low tech solution in a area where bandwidth is really at a premium. Online digital learning is having an impact. So I think we need to think that this is a continuum. It's not all just about high definition videos. There's a whole lot of solutions in there. The final point to make is that, as Lutz said, if you've spent your life teaching, you will have picked up all sorts of tips and tricks. If you start on day one, you've got to learn all of those. It's going to be the same in online. Just as it's worth, if you're going to start lecturing or start teaching, go and speak to someone or be mentored by someone or have assistance from someone who's done it from a long time. There are a lot of shortcuts that experienced learning designers, experienced instructional designers can help you with. So I would encourage people, rather than trying to learn it all yourself and reinvent the wheel, go and speak to people who have done the hard yards and can give you a big step in the right direction.
Great. Thanks very much, Paul. I like the not reinventing the wheel. Other people are doing this and doing it well, including ourselves, the DFI Gateway. I know Lutz has also been doing many good interventions as well. So reach out to people and get that support. And again, it's that continuum, you know, learning, you know, does not need to be just face-to-face or just online, or, you know, having no human contact. The SMS, the phone calls, is in that example reminds me a lot of our community of practice meetings that Esselina was talking about, where the course is online, the content is online, but people meet up in physical locations to discuss that content and contextualize it to their own situations, to really embed the learning and the knowledge and use it, put it into action. So for the last little bit of our webinar, what I want to open up to all of you to input in is, you know, we're wearing multiple hats now. We're either a student thinking about how do we learn online, or maybe we're a manager of a team wanting to train our team and make sure that during this time, you know, and we don't know when and how, whether we'll be able to get back together face-to-face quickly, or it's going to be several months down the line, who knows. But how do we, when we're looking at courses, how do we pick good ones? How do we know they're good? How do we know they're good quality? What sort of things should we be considering when viewing them before we sign up and give our hard-earned cash or time? I'm not sure who wants to start. Maybe I'll go over to you, Lutz. So I'm going to pick on you first.
I'm an eternal optimist, so my answer will be shaped by that. I think all of us have a good sense for when we start something, does it make sense for me or not? Of course, if you're being asked to splurge out a lot of money up front, then it's hard to say, oh, I didn't like it. Most of the things that are available online nowadays have a freemium model, right? You typically can start with testing something, and then before you buy. And there are other quality standards that you can follow. I leave to Paul and Thom to answer on this one, but I would argue the freemium model is something that is really a godsend, because then you can test drive things and go, does it work for me or does it not work for me? And that's what I would go with. The other thing is where the content comes from. Right, we have that as a political issue right now as well, right? Fake news is on everybody's mind. There's something like fake news in learning as well. So you have to pay somewhat attention to where content is coming from, especially if what you want to learn has ramifications of quality standards, of privacy issues, and you name it. So I would also pay attention where it's coming from. And I probably would go with either an academic institution or a big industry provider that has a reputation to lose and to defend, to say that's probably a good indicator, I can trust it. Which, by the way, doesn't automatically mean it makes it good content, because it can still be pretty dull and badly constructed. You can just not trust the dullness, but now that becomes a little bit of a different discussion. So that's probably the things that I would do. And maybe the last thing I would mention, just because there is one question, the last question that's on the Q&A, and it's so much on my mind right now, is how do we provide learning programs that have traditional hands-on thing? What's really interesting, it goes a little bit back to how I see digital transformation is happening. It probably will take a time before we find something where a chef or a cook can be trained fully digital and be really good at what they do. My imagination doesn't quite is sufficient for that. But what's really interesting, I always use the example of a car mechanic. If you're a car mechanic nowadays in a highly developed country, 80 or 90% of the stuff that you do is actually done with a computer. That analyst program and all those kind of things you can easily learn online. I was actually part of a program in Washington State in the US to train nurses. And you might be surprised how much of the training of nurses you can do that's basically now digital, because it's all data driven and computer program driven, you name it. And of course, there are elements where you have to be able to handle a patient and deal with them, but you can actually separate the two. So I think through the penetration of technology into many fields of activities and simulations, we will be able to push the boundary further and further, what can be actually experimented in a real work environment that is not a physical one.
Lutz, if I can jump in there and I can give an actual example. There's agri-colleges in South Africa. They have a relationship with Stellenbosch University, and they are providing online digital distance learning to entry-level workers in the agricultural sector. So they are running courses like planting, fertilizing, and how they've achieved it, again, in rural areas, low bandwidth, is they'll show you the demonstration of how to do it, and then you, using your phone, need to record yourself doing it, and they'll assess it at a distance. So people are coming up with quite clever ways of kind of bridging that divide.
That's a great example. Thanks, Paul. And I'm going to hop over to you, Paul, then. Oh, Esselina, do you have something you wanted to add?
I just want to share or to jump at this stage. I think one of the things will be a big buy-in for online materials and the online teaching will be for sure the quality of those programs and the quality of materials. And as Lutz was saying, will be also very important to know who is delivering those programs. What is the trust that we can have in that kind of program? As we know, in many digital materials, the issue of confidence and the issue of trust is a challenge. It will be also very important in order to deal with that one. And then in the end, will contribute how the new employer that are going to accept all those graduation come for online program that they are going maybe fully to be online, but as I was saying, depending on the development of each institution in each country, definitely we're going to assist boards. I just wanted to comment the first question that came, which was, could you please share some tips on building digital ecosystem regulation on data privacy, equity, integrity, and then if the COVID is a favorable for DFS. In terms of tip for the regulation for data privacy and integrity, I think my tip is that first, starting with the issue of identification. If you are talking about to make privacy of data, we're talking here privacy of data either is for the companies or is for the individual. The first question will be, do we know who are those people that want to make their data privacy? And it's coming the issue of digital ID, which is a very important component. So my tip is that maybe you start to discuss how are you moving from identification until you discuss the issue of privacy and integrity. It's very important in the digital economy that we deal with those issues. Many countries do not yet have a specific regulation, but there are now regulation, and the question to whom belong the data is becoming crucial. Who is the owner of the data? Regarding the COVID-19, yes, it is an opportunity, but it is also a challenge because the way that it's happened is that the pandemic arrived and not everything was prepared to do that. If you think on the mobile money, then you are going to have the agent that are going to have restriction that cannot have. So everything was not prepared to have a fully digital, and maybe it's things that we have to discuss. As I was saying in the beginning, maybe in each business we needed to have a really business continuity plan.
I think we could have a whole webinar by itself on the topic of on those topics for sure. So as we're coming up to the end of the hour, I just want to quickly hop over to Paul or Thom and see whether there's anything before my last question to you all. Is there anything with the two of you would like to input in terms of how do you select a good quality course or provider?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has already been said, but I think reputation is extremely important. I mean, there are reviews on everything now. If you're going to invest your money or your company's money, and certainly your time, you should know what you're getting. I would also think about how it fits in your life, right? How is it structured? Is it multi-weeks, and is it something you can do in the time you have? Is it something that really is asynchronous, where you can do whenever you want, or does it require you to build in specific amounts of time. I think that's really important because I think one of the things about learning online is that it requires a bit more personal agency. And because there's not necessarily a set classroom time, and it requires you to really figure out how you build that into your life.
And I think that's what a lot of us are struggling with, or a lot of people are struggling with right now, working from home and having to sort of adapt to that environment. And you know, online learning is something, you know, on a relatively similar scope to that. Paul, anything from your side to add?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I think just to add on from what Lutz said is that if you go with a big university or a big brand, you will be guaranteed of the quality of the assessment and potentially the standard set, but not necessarily of the experience. That you're going to have to research and ask people who have done the course, because you can get a course that's at the right level and it's hard to pass, and the credit that you get at the end is valuable, but actually the experience is quite difficult. So do your reviews and ask people that have done the course how they found it. I think I'll talk more from the fact that if you now need to engage with people who are going to help you put a course together or put it online, you need to find people that have done it, that have demonstrable results in what they have put together. And I would also try and test that they're not someone that has one solution that they want to apply to every problem. You'll go to people that are learning designers or development houses that develop courses, and they look at everything and they give the same solution. Try and find people that have had a variety of solutions to a variety of problems, because that tells me that they're understanding not only the student and the person that's going to be taking the course, but they also understand that different content and different outcomes needs a different approach. So I would look at those things.
Thank you. And as we wrap up, I want to sort of move to think about, you know, we've said this is an opportunity. We said this is going to take time. Take your first steps. Check out quality, you know, check out the brand, check out what other people have reviewed. If you're trying to move online, partner with people, see what is already out there. Don't try and make those moves yourself. So we've had a lot of discussion around those things. Do we feel like online is going to stick? Or do we think people in 5 years' time are going to go back to be sitting in the classroom just doing face-to-face learning? Or do we see everything being on a continuum? What are your thoughts for the future? Thom, I'm going to start with you this time.
Sure, I absolutely think online is here to stay. And I think we would have seen that without the current situation. I think we've seen it, as I said, I think in the beginning, that it's been through many phases, and it's in a particular phase right now where I think it's gained a lot of momentum. However, nothing beats in person, and I think we all so appreciate that right now, not being able to really see people and be with people. And I think that there's a real value in that. So I don't think we will see the end of in-person learning, but online is definitely here.
Thank you very much, Thom. Esselina, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. For me, in the next future, I do see a mix, both online and also presential, and will differ for the development of each country. There will be countries that are going to continue assist more presential than online, and it will depend, because as I said in the beginning, there are a lot of challenges in terms of resource and also in terms of infrastructure to run this kind of program. So I do see both situation. Even now that we are working remotely, not all organizations, they are ready to have their employees working remotely. And maybe this is also a signal that we are going to continue to have this a mix of both reality, presential, and online. I think tech touch is good, but we need also personal touch as to continue.
Thank you, Esselina. Lutz?
Yeah, I like to, I totally agree. I'd like to add something that hasn't been mentioned yet. So I believe it will stay and will be a continuum. My big hope is that the traditional face-to-face classroom learning will actually improve through the experience. Because the reality is a lot of that traditional classroom learning is actually really, really bad, with all due respect. Because what you have is a talking head that spends 50 minutes of an hour talking at you and then has 5 minutes for any questions. For that, listening to someone, we don't have to get together physically. If anything, it's more cumbersome to try to get together. I'm a big fan of a flipped classroom. If you want to search for it, you will find. But I hope that through the experience that we're creating now, people will wake up, whether in professional or academic environments, and say, do we really need that big lecture where 400 people are crammed together in a room with bad air conditioning and trying to listen to someone that basically just talks for 55 minutes, when that talk can be read or watched somewhere? But let's get together and actually argue about it, demonstrate, present, and you name it, because then we really are doing and then learning. So I hope that the actual traditional thing will become better through the experience that we are forced into right now.
Great, that's a really good point. I remember hating most of the lecture formats that we had when I was at university, and it was always the ones where you got together in groups of 10 to discuss that was always the most interesting. So yeah, I think using the right medium is for the right situation is important. And finally, Paul, over to you.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think I'm of the view that traditional face-to-face is going to change fundamentally. I think that always the big question is data is expensive and data is limited and connectivity is limited. That's true as it stands now, but we know that in time that problem will get solved. So that barrier in time will disappear. I think when I go back to my days of helping businesses migrate from traditional businesses to digital businesses, there was this divide between, there was commerce and e-commerce. We don't think like that anymore. There's just business. And I'd like to think that we'll get to the point that there's just learning. And that it is a combination of things that happen in person and a combination of things that happen digitally, that there's physical interaction, that there's social interaction online. I think Lutz is right. This black and white will disappear. We'll just have the concept of learning. But the world moves on. If you go back 10 years and you went to an airport, people stood in queues to check in. And the argument was, I like to see the person check me in and it makes me feel comfortable and I like the interaction. And now we do it all ourselves online and we don't look back. And I think we'll become more comfortable with learning online over the next sort of 5 or 10 years.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to all of you, to Lutz, to Esselina, Paul and Thom, and obviously to all of our attendees that joined us as well, and all the good questions that have been put forward today. I hope this has satisfied a little bit of social networking connection. At least you've seen some human faces and heard some voices, but I also hope it's really helped encourage you to take that step either personally, or encourage you to move maybe your content online, or encourage you to seek different ways to capacity build your team during this difficult time, but also thinking about how you can think about all of these things long term. Do take advantage of the opportunity, don't rush, think about quality, but I hope that everybody will have an enjoyable online learning experience, whatever choices they make. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon, evening, or day, depending on where you are. And we'll see you on a DFI webinar again soon, shortly. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.